everyone, and welcome to Legislative Insight. I'm Margie O'Brien. We try to discuss some of the pending bills before the General Assembly on this program, and there are several that are very important. They're about dyslexia and early intervention, hoping to really help these children that are suffering from dyslexia. Representative Eileen Naughton, Representative William O'Brien, thanks for being here. I know that you are deep into this, so let's get to the heart of the matter. I love one of your quotes. These children with dyslexia are not broken or damaged. They just have an obstacle to overcome.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, in Rhode Island, we're not proactive enough. We need to be more proactive to find people with dyslexia and other forms of reading disabilities. Because once you're 3 years behind, and that's what, before a child can get an IEP in the state of Rhode Island, they have to be 3 years behind in reading. And the special ed departments torture the parents to prove that they're even 3 years behind. The special ed departments are torturing parents. And it's because they don't want to give them the services, because the services cost money. The more they will have to hire more special ed teachers, for example. But these children deserve the services because they are dyslexic or in other forms of other reading disability.
But is that short-sighted that if they're 3 years behind, won't their problems be magnified and more expensive?
That's why, if you look, our SAT scores are around 499 for English. If you look at states that are 611, like I believe that's Illinois. Illinois has early intervention programs. We do not. We need early intervention programs to help these children. And that's the bill that we just passed 75-0 last year, which got caught up in the Senate. The Senate didn't pass it. This year we passed it just 2 weeks ago, passed 74-0. So this bill in the House has never, not one person has been against it. So it should pass this year.
And do you feel like the Senate will approve this and that we'll actually see this from Rhode Island?
I certainly hope so. The Dyslexia Commission unanimously endorsed Representative O'Brien's legislation. And this was after a study looking at other states and what they have done and best practices, even in our neighboring states.
Both Connecticut and Massachusetts have this already.
Yes,
correct.
And they're far more advanced than we are.
So I think about the days where you started kindergarten and you had tests for scoliosis, you had tests for hearing and eyesight. Couldn't this be just lumped in with those mandatory tests? That's what
we're hoping for, and that's what the children of Rhode Island deserve that. And we want to identify them early, and it's because they're not broken. They just have an additional obstacle in front of them that we need to break down. And when we break it down, they can be just as successful as anybody else. There's many dyslexics who are very successful. And they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're teachers, police officers, they're firemen.
And they're state representatives.
And they're state representatives.
So this is very near and dear to your heart.
Yes, it is. I was diagnosed with dyslexia in the first grade, and my father and mother had to take me to a psychiatrist because the North Providence School Department refused to recognize it. So my parents had to prove it to them, which they did, obviously, and I got the help I needed. And I graduated high school with honors. I graduated college with honors.
That is fantastic. And I think that in just doing research, dyslexia is something that you can overcome. You just have to learn differently.
It's a chronic condition, but you can develop the tools to be able to manage it. And we have learned that there are research-based interventions, teaching methods that actually demonstrate that because the brain, particularly of children, is neuroplastic, and it can rewire, and it's enabling these children to learn with their peers and to also achieve the goals that they envision for themselves and the talents they have.
I would imagine this also goes to the self-esteem of the student.
Most definitely.
So you're, as a first grader, you're feeling like maybe you're behind Susie and Tommy here, and that doesn't help.
That doesn't help at all, and especially when you get 3 years behind, other people start picking on you, and then you start hating school, and you don't want to go to school school anymore, and this is what this legislation tries to prevent. It tries to get them early, get them the help they need so they can be 100% successful.
Did your parents diagnose you before the schools got involved?
Yes.
And how did they see that?
Well, my father, my father was JFK. JFK was his hero, and he was dyslexic. And Albert Einstein was dyslexic. He was one of my fathers. That's why I'm a math teacher, because Albert Einstein is one of my heroes also. So my father and mother did the research and noticed it in me. And took me to a psychiatrist to get the evidence that they needed to prove it so I can get an IEP. And remember, in the 70s, and that was a new word, new phrase, IEP. Sure. Individual lesson plans were not, in the 1960s, there was no such thing. So this was it was just coming about in the 70s. So I was very lucky to have parents that knew what to do.
And I think it's hard, too, when the parents are already facing a challenge to have to seek out the help. Mm-hmm. You should think that this help should be available.
Correct. The special ed departments should be working hand in hand with parents to try to diagnose their kids properly. And when you're working against that, you shouldn't even be called a teacher. You should be called, I don't even want to say what you should be called, but it's inappropriate. And the special ed departments throughout the state have to learn new best practices, and they have to learn, and they have to do those best practices for our children, just like teachers have to do it for our children in a classroom.
Sure. So we are moving forward on this. The Dyslexia Commission started last fall, or even earlier? Earlier.
Yes, and that's one of the key issues, identifying a child as soon and early as possible. And there are methods to do that, and to have those that are working with children in preschool, kindergarten, I recognize things that aren't quite right and being able to refer them to a specialist to have that confirmed or get some special help, either individual, one-on-one, or with a group. Early is the best thing to do here before there's issues with self-esteem.
Would you hope that the Commissioner of Education would push this and make it a priority?
We have met with Commissioner Wagner, and we were very, very pleased with how he responded. Right. And we are working now, hopefully we'll be able to develop a pilot in one of the districts that will be able to demonstrate the effectiveness for not only specialist learning about dyslexia, but having the general classroom teachers learn about identifying it and what they can do to help that child.
Now, is this the rub? Is this where they say this costs money because there'll be extra training, or is it cost effective to train your teachers that already exist to look for these red flags? Oh,
most definitely. The United States Department of Ed, just to give you a perspective, has identified dyslexia as being over 2 million individuals, and that is mainly to children with individual education plans, perhaps a 504, but does not recognize any of the other children that might be just on research-based interventions. And they most likely and admit that there are probably many more children that aren't being recognized.
We were talking a little bit off camera that some of these children are so smart in other aspects that they learn to cover up or maybe not show exactly what they're not learning.
Correct.
And that's a challenge for teachers as well.
They become experts at avoidance and developing either sickness or being a jokester, or some way to avoid that measure in the classroom that would call attention to their inability to read or do math, to compute math.
So oftentimes they're probably considered a disciplinary problem.
That's correct.
And not a learning disability.
That's right. Behavior issues.
Yes. So if this legislation were to pass, what is the time frame for making this a mandated process in Rhode Island?
It would be as soon as it passes. It would be, and every district will have to develop it within for the next school system, the next school year.
Okay. But that does make sense to have the pilot program to sort of test it, see how it works, and then maybe to duplicate it in each school district.
Correct.
Yes. And be able to provide, most of us are familiar today with help desks at work, wherever you go.
Oh, sure.
And we think that the education system, perhaps it's time for them to have the help desk so that teachers will have these resources that will be able to respond and provide expert assistance while retaining that child in the classroom as much as possible.
And 27 states already have these laws on the books, so the departments of ed should be able to learn from those other 27 states.
And we wouldn't have to recreate the wheel here.
Correct.
That's right. We even have guidance documents used in the other states that Rhode Island could go to.
And this is something that could take place in the classroom during a typical school day?
That's right.
Correct.
Oh. So again, getting back to the vote, who would be against this?
Well, it passed unanimous at
The House
Representative
passed it.
O'Brien's bill.
Is the
And there's
only
very
hang
few
up the
bills that
cost?
pass unanimously, and it's passed twice unanimously.
Okay.
Yes, and there is education money for professional development, which is something that it would be really very beneficial to teaching them about awareness, simply awareness even at the preschool level about dyslexia, the signs, symptoms of it would be an important thing. Many parents don't know exactly what is going on with their kids when they play games looking for certain places, and the child doesn't catch on to that name or rhyme, and they say lawn instead of lawn more, for instance, and they will be able then to say, well, maybe we should get this looked at. Let's try. And we can help that child right away develop ways to deal with it.
And I was reading more about this, that a lot of times they'll see a word, perhaps that, and they know it starts with a T and ends with a T, but they'll turn it into treat.
They can't move the letters together. They can't bring the letters to one sound.
And how about the comprehension? Is that also an issue?
Yes, and that may, certain types of dyslexia, that might not show up until they're more advanced in school, where they have to do more in-depth comparison or writing.
So if we do catch them at these very early ages, they could go through elementary school getting the help they need and perhaps be really ready to tackle middle school without
and being
an
confident.
And confident.
Self-confident.
Well, that's really half the problem.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And it teaches them to like school instead of hate it. So once the child hates school, he's not going to be successful because he doesn't want to go. If you don't want to be part of something, you're not going to be good at it.
And this affects their social relationship with their peers as well.
Sure. So let's, in just about a minute left, let's fast forward to having this on the books. How does it benefit Rhode Island and the communities?
Well, let's look at the other 27 states that have it, 26, 27 states. All of them have higher SAT scores than we do. It's between 10, whereas Connecticut's 10 points ahead of us, Massachusetts 20 points ahead of us, and Illinois, I believe Illinois is at 611, so they're 112 points ahead of us. So this bill will help our children and will bring up our SAT scores, and that's the most important thing. It's about helping our children and helping our children compete in this 20th century.
And it's about jobs. When they can read and understand instructions and following things, it's about jobs that pay well. And that's what we're looking at, too. We can't hope to get them good jobs unless they have these skills.
But it's really, this is the time to really offer as much help as possible so that they have brighter futures.
Absolutely.
That's right, before bad habits set in.
Okay. Thank you both so much, Representative Naughton, Representative O'Brien, and thank you, too, for sharing your personal story with us.
No problem.
I do appreciate that. We will definitely keep an eye on these bills, and we hope for the best. And that was another episode of Legislative Insight. I'm Margie O'Brien. Have a great day.